My friend, who was a successful businessman, wasn't entirely comfortable with his friend's real estate position and asked me what she should do. I told him the outlook for residential real estate had turned sour, and she should start selling as quickly as possible. In retrospect, if she had followed my advice, she probably would have escaped the collapse of the residential real estate market in 2007. But to illustrate how brilliant I really am as a pundit, that same year I found myself being interviewed by a local publication and was asked what I thought about the subprime mortgage market, which was suddenly making a lot of people nervous. My response went something like this: subprime only represents a small portion of the mortgage market. Factually, I was right, but my implied message was off the mark. Such is the soothsaying business these days. If you get right 50% of whatever you might be divining these days, you should consider yourself lucky. This is what no one predicted. When the residential real estate market bubble finally burst, as it did in 2007, the collapse would be so sudden, so quick, and so deep that a little over a year later, it would mean the end of the independent investment bank, an institution that dominated Wall Street since the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933. Here's a journalist's story on how fast the collapse came. In June 2007, I was asked by my editor at Mortgage Banking Magazine to write a story on Tucson, Arizona-based First Magnus Financial Corporation, which was one of the country's largest privately held mortgage companies. Earlier that year, National Mortgage News ranked First Magnus as the 9th largest Alt-A lender in the country with $2.6 billion in volume. The story was written, edited, and ready to be published when in August, First Magnus filed for bankruptcy protection. In less than 2 months, it went from a successful entrepreneurial company with over 5,000 employees and a bright tomorrow to nothing. The company evaporated over the course of 6 weeks, and First Magnus executives never saw it coming. When I spoke with them in June, the future was written in highlighter colors all over their faces. In the course of interviewing people for this book, when picking out the culprits of the great real estate mortgage industry devaluation, a number of sources mentioned the press. I thought that was a bit unfair, not only because I'm a journalist, but for a couple of years starting around 2005 and certainly through 2006, many financial publications were calling the crazy, rampant housing sector a bubble that was about to burst. Bubble, bubble, the columnist called out, quoting market analysts, investors, hedge fund execs, and equity market decision makers. And of course, it's all toil and trouble now. So much for bubble, bubble. As a scribe who writes for almost a dozen different real estate and financial publications on a regular basis, I've personally written dozens of stories about the impending bursting of the housing bubble. Now I wonder who read those articles. Not being an industry insider, I wonder what happens when you sense the end of the good times is nigh. Judging from what happens to lenders, home builders, Wall Street, big banks, and so on, I guess you do nothing and keep running forward for as fast and as far as you can before everything collapses around you. At some point, do you say to yourself, it looks like the end of the run and we should begin to scale back? Or is the forward momentum so great that it is just too hard to put on the brakes, let alone reverse direction? When Ralph Cioffi and Matthew Tannen, two former Bear Stearns hedge fund managers, were arrested in 2008 and indicted on conspiracy and securities fraud charges, in my heart I wanted to say it was unfair that two people should be singled out for the company's folly. But truth be told, I had no sympathy for them. Cioffi said, on record, I knew the party was over, especially for residential mortgages. But neither he nor Tannen could bring themselves to stop selling mortgage-backed securities investments.